Can we mix and match COVID-19 vaccines? Health Minister Sun Suzhong says he's tired of answering that question, and we'll have some answers in today's show.
Also today, we'll tell you about the first Taiwanese vaccine to get emergency use authorization.
Our eyes are also on Lithuania, where Taiwan is setting up a Taiwanese representative office.
Staś Butler talks to two experts on Taiwan-EU relations to find out what it means for both sides. This is Taiwan Insider. Everybody in Taiwan is talking about vaccines. In fact, before this weekend, 3 out of the 7 people on our team will have gotten their first jab. Now, unfortunately, I'm not one of those 3, but hopefully I'll get mine soon. Now, the biggest vaccine-related story this week is that Taiwan's Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, has passed emergency use authorization for Taiwan's first COVID-19 vaccine.
The Central Epidemic Command Center announced on Monday that Taiwan's Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, has granted Emergency Use Authorization, or EUA, for a COVID-19 vaccine produced by Taiwan-based Medigen Vaccine Biologics. The decision was made by a panel of 21 experts who held a vote on whether to approve the vaccine on Sunday. 18 members voted to approve, 1 opposed, and 1 asked for more data. The new vaccine will also be reviewed by the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices before it can be added to the National Vaccination Program. Once it's approved, a small number of doses could be administered starting August. Taiwan's FDA Director Wu Xiumei said the AstraZeneca vaccine was chosen for comparison with the Medigen vaccine because it was the only vaccine available in Taiwan at the time of testing. The tests found that the geometric mean titer, or GMT, level of neutralizing antibodies in participants who got the Medigen vaccine was 3.4 times higher than those who received the AstraZeneca vaccine. The other key result was the vaccine's seroresponse rate, which is the percentage of people who generate an immune response. That was 95.5%, which is higher than the required 50%. Wu said the Medigen vaccine is suitable for adults aged 20 and older, and each person needs 2 doses at least 28 days apart. Medigen must also provide a safety report every month and a report on the vaccine's effectiveness after being administered in Taiwan and other countries after 1 year.
Now, what's interesting about the Medigen vaccine is that the technology behind it is totally different from other major vaccines like Pfizer and AstraZeneca. Here's a little refresher course. One type of vaccine uses little fragments of mRNA. That includes the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine and the Moderna vaccine. Another type is viral vector vaccines. That's like AstraZeneca. Then there's the traditional inactivated pathogen vaccines, which include the Chinese vaccines Sinovac and Sinopharm. And the fourth type is protein subunit vaccines, which include both the Taiwanese vaccines, Medigen and UBI. Now, in a moment, we're going to talk about how effective these vaccines are. But first, we're going to take a quick dive into the technology with Staś Butler.
Protein subunit vaccines take little parts of the virus and use those to trigger immunity. For COVID-19, that means harvesting the spike proteins from the surface of the virus. This kind of vaccine is incapable of causing the disease because the spike proteins on their own can't infect human cells. That means they're very safe. The technology is already well established, and scientists have used it to make a highly safe and effective vaccine for hepatitis B. One drawback is that using small parts of the virus rather than the whole thing means sometimes the body doesn't react strongly to the vaccine. That means the immune response is sometimes weaker. Luckily, there's a way around this, which involves adding a thing called an adjuvant to make the immune system respond more strongly.
Now, the million-dollar question is, how effective are Taiwan's locally developed vaccines? And the short answer is we don't know, and that's because neither one has passed phase 3 clinical trials. Now, the CECC says that these vaccines are comparable to a similar vaccine, Novavax. The technology is the same, and in phase 3 trials, Novavax was shown to be 90% effective overall and 100% effective in preventing moderate or severe illness. Now, again, we won't have any data on the effectiveness of the two Taiwanese vaccines until they conduct phase 3 clinical trials. Now, we turn now to a question that reporters have been asking Health Minister Chen Shizhong every single day, and that is, can you mix and match vaccines?
If you count our new Medigen vaccine, Taiwan will soon have 4 different brands of COVID vaccines. That includes AstraZeneca, Moderna, and BioNTech-Pfizer. Now the question is, can we mix and match?
It's the question on everyone's lips. Can you mix different brands of COVID-19 vaccine? And Health Minister Chen Shizhong, for one, is sick of answering it. He says people ask him the same question almost every day. That comes after some Taiwanese health experts called for authorities to allow vaccine mixing. Wang Renqian is Honorary Managing Director of the Taiwan Counter-Contagious Diseases Society. He says following AstraZeneca with a dose of Pfizer-BioNTech gives better protection than 2 doses of AstraZeneca. Wang says that could also be the case for AstraZeneca and Moderna. Huang Limin from the Infectious Diseases Society of Taiwan agrees. He says following AstraZeneca with Pfizer-BioNTech gives similar protection to 2 doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. Huang says he thinks allowing vaccine mixing will encourage people to take AstraZeneca as their first dose. Dr. Zhou Baiqian of Taipei Medical University Hospital says research from reputable sources supports mixing AstraZeneca and Moderna. He says it's safe and effective. Zhou says Taiwan has been too slow to set up clinical trials of mixing since the country is almost out of Moderna doses. But he says if studies in Taiwan show promising immune responses to mixing in young people, for example, Taiwan should officially allow vaccine mixing for everyone. But experts say mixing vaccines won't necessarily speed up the vaccination process. That's because some research suggests it's best to wait 8 to 10 weeks before the second dose to allow for the best immune response. For now, though, Health Minister Chen Shizhong says there's not enough scientific evidence in favour of mixing. So, if you've already had your first dose, there should be little surprise about which one you'll get for the second.
Taiwan has actually begun trials for mixing AstraZeneca and Moderna, and the results are expected in about 3 months. Now, the CEC also has said this week that it's considering conducting a trial mixing Taiwan's Medigen vaccine with others, as there's no international data out on it. Taiwan and Lithuania have seen friendly ties recently, and the big news this week is that Taiwan is going to open a representative office in Lithuania. Now, what's special about this office? Let's take a look.
Lithuania is located in northeastern Europe and has a population of 2.8 million. On Tuesday, Foreign Minister Joseph Wu said Taiwan will set up the Taiwanese representative office in Lithuania in its capital city of Vilnius. Wu was wearing a face mask featuring the Formosan black bear and Lithuania's national flag, a symbol of friendship between the two sides. During Taiwan's vaccine shortage, Lithuania has promised to donate 20,000 vaccines to Taiwan. Taiwan opened an office in Slovakia in 2003. Now, 18 years later, it is setting up a representative office in Lithuania. Wu said that Taiwan and Lithuania are on the front line of safeguarding democracy. He believes that through shared values, people from the two countries will be able to have a positive influence in the world. Lithuania established former diplomatic ties with China in September 1991. This is the first time that Beijing has agreed to Taiwan setting up an office in its allied country. DPP lawmaker Wang Dingyu said if the pattern of Lithuania's double recognition of Taiwan and China continues, it will be positive for Taiwan's diplomacy and China's image as well.
So what does this mean for the future of relations between European countries and Taiwan? Well, Staś Butler spoke with Dr. Ivana Karaskova from the Association for International Affairs and Dr. Zuzana Anna Ferenczi from the European Union Center at National Taiwan University.
Taiwan already has more than 50 representative offices around the world. What makes this representative office different from the others?
We're absolutely right that Taipei Economic and Cultural offices are all over the world in a number of countries, but most of these offices are coming from previous times. So we are now talking about very different time with more assertive China and at least stronger expectations of some kind of Chinese reaction or Chinese retaliation against that. Plus, the name is, of course, interesting because usually we are talking about Taipei Economic and Cultural Offices. Now we are talking about an office which has Taiwan specifically in its name. So that's quite an achievement, actually, from the Taiwan Diplomatic Service.
You know, this is not, as we say, it's not kind of a move that's necessarily confined to just Lithuania. We've seen other countries, notably in Central and Eastern Europe, such as the Czech Republic, such as Slovakia, kind of reaching out to Taiwan. Why are these Central European countries? Why are they doing that? Why this grouping?
I think we have to go back and look at the larger context of the EU's relations with China. And of course, I'm always very mindful that the question is on Taiwan, so let's stick to Taiwan. But it is the reality of things that we cannot talk about the dynamics in EU-Taiwan relations as well as Lithuania-Taiwan relations without being mindful of the context of EU-China relations. So there is a shift in EU-China relations. We've seen that shift taking place also on a smaller scale in the 17+1 platform. As you know, that is the platform that China initiated Beijing initiated back in 2012 to bring together 11 member states in Central Eastern Europe and plus 5 states from the Western Balkans in this platform for infrastructure investment and connectivity. But more and more countries have realized that cooperation has not been very fruitful. So I think it's important to look at this not as a gesture nor an initiative to go against China, but to be more able to protect ourselves.
If we look at it from the Chinese perspective, there is not so many things China can actually do about the countries deciding to shift their attention from China to Taiwan. So there's also quite a low probability of China's retaliation, which enables Central and Eastern European country to have more leeway, more bigger space for maneuvering than, for example, Western Europe.
Well, I mean, that brings me on to my next question, which is kind of how has China responded to this? And should these countries, like Lithuania, fear some kind of reprisal for this action?
Rhetorically, of course, there's going to be a lot of bashing, a lot of threats issued from the Chinese side, which we have seen, for example, when the Czech Senate President Vystrčil visited Taiwan. It was exactly the same story behind that. But in practical terms, China has very limited capabilities of retaliation. Economically speaking, Western Europe and Western investors are much more prominent and much more important for Central and Eastern Europeans, as well as other Asian investors. So South Korean investors, Japanese investors, also Taiwanese investors are much more prominent than Chinese investors in Central and Eastern Europe. And last but not least, we are part of European Union, so we are shielded against retaliation, direct economic retaliation from China. And militarily, well, this is out of the question, both because of the geographic space between us and China, and also we are part of NATO.
Saying this all goes ahead, because, I mean, plans like this, where Taiwan decides to set up a representative office in a country, have been scuppered in the past. I mean, very recently in Guyana, there was a case of Taiwan hoping to establish an office, and seemingly all the plans being set for that, only for it to fail at the last minute. And there were accusations there, obviously, of influence by China. If saying that this goes ahead, and it looks like it will, does this set a precedent? I mean, could this lead to further countries deciding that they want to do more business with Taiwan? Or could this lead to other countries deciding that perhaps they want to rename their office and include the word Taiwan in that title?
I do not exclude the value of Lithuania's decision to open office in Taiwan as a precedent. So I think Lithuania's decision sets a precedent for Riga and Tallinn to equally open an office in Taiwan in the future.
If I may go back to the first part of the question, which was whether this is going to materialize, I think that there's a very high chance that this is going to go through, because Lithuania is already seeing the gains from its foreign policy based on values. It just recently secured a NATO summit in 2023. There are some serious talks about their former president, Grybauskaitė, to be one of the serious contenders to be a new general secretary of NATO. As for the second part of the question, whether it may inspire other offices, well, it depends on a number of factors. I think that most countries will adopt wait-and-see approach to see what kind of retaliation, if any, is going to come to Lithuania. Then they will do cost-benefit analysis and decide whether this is worth it.
And one Taiwanese lawmaker perhaps pushed it a little far, but said that he saw this as a form of dual recognition of China and Taiwan in Lithuania. I mean, do you see it that way?
No. Well, I'd still think that one China policy is going to play a huge role in decision-making of different countries. So I don't think that the countries will go as far as severing ties with China and establishing ties with Taiwan. And to have a dual recognition under the current situation, I don't think this is viable. But of course, what the countries can do is to kind of disrupt one China policy on the fringes. And that's exactly what this quite provocative move from Lithuania and Taiwan is doing.
We need to be realistic, and we need to keep in mind that the EU's relations with China, even though there is a shift in the way we perceive China, we still remain focused on having an element of engagement with China. We should not expect any dramatic and big change on that front.
And what do you think that Taiwan can gain specifically from its ties with Lithuania, I guess?
I think, first of all, visibility in Europe. For obvious reasons, we know that the Taiwanese society, as well as the government, has prioritized relations with the United States. And Europe has always been more in the background and less visible. So by opening up offices on both ends, it clearly will help increase visibility for Taiwan in Europe, in the Baltics. It will also help increase visibility for Europe in Taiwan. Visibility means raising awareness. That's why I speak about visibility, because it starts with the visibility, it starts with understanding, and not only understanding what Taiwan is, but what Taiwan stands for and what the commonalities are between the Baltic states and Taiwan, and also what this means for Europe to understand that the situation that Taiwan is in at the moment and not addressing that situation is not far away in Asia somewhere, as people in Europe see, because there are implications for Europe. So I think the visibility, the raising awareness and understanding of the implications of not helping or not acting is what is important. So I think it's significant for the near future.
We'll have the full interview up on YouTube and Facebook. Before we leave you, a look at some of the stories on our radar.
A Taiwanese Buddhist organization, the Tzu Chi Foundation, has signed a deal to import 5 million doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. It's the latest in a string of Taiwanese organizations to buy this brand of vaccine from abroad. Tech firm TSMC and the Foxconn-affiliated Yonglin Charity and Education Foundation have each pledged to import 5 million doses too. The arrival of these vaccine doses will allow Taiwan to begin a new phase in its COVID vaccination program, targeting people between 12 and 18 years of age. The Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine will be the only vaccine offered to those in this age bracket once it gets local approval. The director of Taiwan's sports administration has tendered his resignation. That's amid a ruckus over flight arrangements for Taiwan's Olympic athletes. The athletes were supposed to fly to Tokyo in business class, but were downgraded to economy at the last minute, apparently because the business class cabin was too small to allow for social distancing. But what has many in Taiwan, including the premier and some lawmakers, upset is the fact that government officials flying to the games took the business class seats instead. President Tsai Ing-wen has personally apologized, and the athletes will get an upgrade on their flight back home. Typhoon In-fa is expected to scrape past Taiwan's north coast over the weekend, bringing heavy rain and strong winds to much of the island. In-fa is the first typhoon to affect Taiwan since 2019.
And now we turn to our final question of the day. What do you like to mix and match? We go first to Natalie.
I like to mix and match fashion items, you know, dresses and jackets and jewelry and shoes. It's all a lot of fun.
All right, we turn now to Stash.
My favorite thing to mix and match is business and casual. I mean, I'm sure we're all used to this from working at home when you're doing an interview. Obviously, you have to look nice on the upper half, but lower half, why not stay comfortable?
Nice, I like that. Well, you know, it's interesting. We all thought of fashion. Perhaps you should check out what mine is. I like wearing different colors of socks. So there you go. That is what we like to mix and match. Thanks so much for joining us for Taiwan Insider. I'm Andrew Ryan.
I'm Natalie Tso. Have a great week.
I'm Staś Butler, and I'll see you next week.
And as always, be sure to connect with us on social media and leave a comment below. We would love to hear from you. See you next week. Taiwan 加油!